Usually when we talk about a medical diagnosis, there's like this expectation of precision,
Yeah,
right?
exactly. We treat it a lot like mechanical engineering.
Right. Like you break your arm, the x-ray shows that jagged white line on the radius bone, and the doctor just points and says, there it is. That's the problem.
We really crave that visibility. I mean, we like things to be neatly categorized, localized, and easily fixed with, like a cast or a scalpel.
But the moment you step into the world of human energy, into neurodevelopment, cellular biology, trauma, that x-ray machine is just completely
Oh,
useless.
totally useless.
We're looking at a diagnostic landscape that is incredibly murky. It's a place where these invisible forces, both ancient and quantum, sort of dictate how we feel, how we heal, and how we function every single day.
Yeah, and if you've ever felt totally drained, despite, sleeping 8 hours and eating well, you can't just put that feeling of exhaustion under a standard microscope. You can't point to a single jagged line.
Exactly. Which
Yeah,
is so frustrating.
it really is. And, well, that is the ultimate diagnostic blind spot of classical Western medicine. I mean, for decades, a lack of vitality was often just dismissed as psychosomatic.
Like it was all in your head.
Right. Because we simply didn't have the tools to measure the microscopic systemic failures that were happening across billions of cells simultaneously.
Which brings us to the, frankly, fascinating stack of research we are unpacking today. We're looking at this incredible convergence of fields.
It's a really diverse stack.
Yeah, we have papers on quantum biology, biophysics texts detailing molecular tunneling, and classical traditional Chinese medicine texts, including the ancient Materia Medica.
Which is just a gold mine of information.
It really is. And the wildest part of the research we are looking at today is that thousands of years ago, ancient Chinese medicine mapped out this exact murky landscape of human energy.
Yeah, and modern quantum biology is just now proving the literal biological mechanisms behind it.
Okay, let's unpack this, because the mission for this deep dive is to give you, the listener, the ultimate instruction manual for your body's energy grid.
I love that. An instruction manual.
Right. By the end of this, you will understand exactly how to generate, protect, and optimize your cellular energy, your ATP, and your qi.
And we're going to use actionable science-backed habits to do it. But to understand energy, we have to look past the organs, past the tissue, and past the cell, right down into the mitochondria.
The powerhouse of the cell.
Exactly, the classic powerhouse. I mean, modern science views energy primarily through biochemistry.
Wow.
We look at adenosine triphosphate, or ATP, as the biological fuel.
And the electron transport chain, right.
Right, but ancient Chinese texts define qi as these fundamental, infinitesimal energy particles that just permeate the entire universe.
Which, on the surface, those sound like they're from completely different planets.
Oh, totally.
But I was reading the translated texts, and they describe qi not as some mystical aura, but as actual microscopic particles and the structural power they manifest.
And when you cross-reference that with the biophysics papers we have, well, biophysicists are now looking at ATP as the literal biochemical unit of qi.
The language is actually converging. Inside the mitochondria, ATP is produced. But what the newest quantum biology sources reveal is that this isn't just like basic classical chemistry.
No, not at all. The production of ATP relies heavily on this phenomenon called quantum tunneling.
Quantum tunneling. This is where the standard rules of physics just completely shatter.
Yeah, they go out the window.
Because in classical physics, if you have a particle that needs to cross an energy barrier, it has to have enough kinetic energy to go over that barrier.
Right, like rolling a boulder.
Exactly. If I want to roll a boulder up a hill, I have to push it all the way up. If I stop pushing halfway, it just rolls back down. But the quantum world doesn't care about the hill.
Not even a little bit.
Yeah.
Because particles like electrons and protons, they act as both particles and waves.
Okay, particle-wave duality.
Right. And because of their wave-like properties, there is a mathematical probability that they can simply pass through a physical or energetic barrier.
Even if they don't have the energy to go over it.
Exactly. Even if they lack the classical kinetic energy.
It's like a video game character just glitching through a solid wall instead of spending the time and energy to climb all the way over it.
That's a perfect analogy. It is the ultimate energy-saving hack built directly into our biology.
And this glitching is happening like continuously inside our cells.
Continuously. The sources highlight the electron transport chain, which maintains the electrochemical gradient needed to produce ATP.
Right.
Within complex I of this chain, specifically looking at subunits Nd2, Nd4, and Nd5 protons and electrons, are bypassing physical energy barriers using this exact quantum tunneling mechanism.
So they're moving from the mitochondrial matrix into the inner membrane space.
Yeah, and with just astonishing efficiency.
And they are doing this to maintain the electrical potential of the inner mitochondrial membrane, the IMM, right? Because if our cells had to rely purely on classical mechanics, like actually pushing the boulder up the hill every single time, the energy cost to pump these protons against their gradient would be astronomically high.
Well, it would be impossible. We would probably have to consume an impossible amount of food just to generate enough energy to stay alive.
So quantum tunneling allows the mitochondrion to preserve its electrical potential and adapt to cellular stress with, like, minimal energy expenditure.
Yeah, but for this tunneling to occur, the particles have to maintain their wave-like probability. They have to stay in a state called quantum coherence.
Quantum coherence. That's when the phase relationship between quantum waves remains perfectly synchronized, right?
Exactly. And maintaining this delicate coherence in a warm, messy, fluid biological environment like a human cell is incredibly difficult.
I mean, physicists used to think it was impossible.
Right, because of the thermal noise.
Mm.
But the numbers in the studies are just mind-blowing. The research estimates that the energy provided by ATP hydrolysis.
Wait, that's the literal breaking of the ATP molecule's phosphate bond to release energy.
Yes. That process provides just enough energy to maintain this quantum coherence for about 160 femtoseconds.
A femtosecond? That is 1/4,000,000th of a second, right?
Yeah, it's unimaginably fast. But 160 of them is just enough time to allow these crucial synchronized energy transfers to occur in the macromolecules.
So ATP is providing the specific energetic environment to sustain the quantum state that allows more ATP to be produced.
Exactly. The fuel sustains the glitch that makes the fuel.
It's basically a microscopic perpetual motion machine. That's wild. But let me push back on this a bit.
Sure.
If our cells are operating on this incredibly efficient, magical quantum level, why do I wake up feeling like a zombie some mornings? Like, where's my quantum efficiency when I need 3 cups of coffee just to answer an email?
What's fascinating here is that the answer lies in a concept called decoherence.
Incoherence.
Yeah, it's the loss of this quantumness. It happens when these super delicate quantum entities interact with chaotic, non-quantum macroscopic objects.
Or when they are subjected to excessive thermal noise or physiological stress, I imagine.
Exactly. The real world crashes the quantum party.
So when your body is subjected to chronic stress or, a diet high in processed foods, environmental toxins,
Or simply the accumulation of oxidative damage from aging. All of that introduces biological friction.
and that accelerates decoherence.
Right. The quantum waves lose their synchronization and collapse into classical states. When that happens, quantum tunneling efficiency just plummets.
Wow. So your protons and electrons can no longer glitch through the wall. They actually have to climb it.
And because they don't have the kinetic energy to climb it, your mitochondria can't produce ATP efficiently. The voltage of your cellular battery literally drops.
So that macroscopic feeling of being totally drained, that brain fog, that heavy limbs feeling,
Yeah.
that is the direct macro level result of microscopic decoherence.
Exactly. And in the diagnostic language of traditional Chinese medicine, that systemic drop in efficient energy production is classified as a key deficiency.
The classical texts describe it as a lack of fundamental driving force.
Right. So if you're doing everything right on paper, but you're still exhausted, the noise in your system is drowning out the quantum signal.
You are losing the quantum edge that allows life to function at such a high levels of complexity.
Exactly.
Okay, so we have established what the fuel is and how it's made. But producing energy is only half the biological equation. Controlling it, regulating it across billions of cells so we don't, spontaneously combust or freeze to death requires a master operating system.
And that requires a framework of dynamic homeostasis, which brings us directly to the ancient concept of dualities.
Yeah, I was looking at how the sources map this out, and it's fascinating. When most people hear yin and yang, they think of a philosophical concept.
Or a symbol on a yoga studio wall.
Right. But the literature makes it explicitly clear that yin and yang perfectly mirror modern cellular regulation. It's basically the biological binary code.
It really is. One of the papers brought up Earl Sutherland's Nobel Prize-winning work from 1971.
Oh yeah, the cyclic AMP stuff.
Exactly. He demonstrated the antagonistic actions of two cellular molecules,
Yeah.
CGMP and KMP. These molecules regulate cellular functions in an entirely opposing yet completely complementary manner.
So Sutherland's work is the literal biochemical embodiment of yin and yang.
Exactly. Cyclic AMP, or KMP, often acts as an accelerant. It promotes energy mobilization, breaking down glycogen for quick fuel.
So that is a yang function.
Right. And cyclic GMP, CGMP, typically acts as the brake. It promotes relaxation, like the vasodilation of blood vessels.
Which is a yin function.
Yes. The cell requires the constant oscillation between these two to survive.
I notice this maps perfectly onto our macrobiology too, specifically the autonomic nervous system.
Oh, absolutely.
We have the sympathetic nervous system, our fight or flight response. It accelerates the heartbeat, warms the body, dilates the pupils, and mobilizes glucose for immediate action.
That is pure yang. It is active, outward, and consuming.
Right. And counterbalancing that is the parasympathetic nervous system, the rest and digest mode,
which slows the heartbeat, cools the body, routes blood to the digestive tract, restores tissue, and stores energy for later.
That is yin. You can't survive in a permanent state of either. Health is defined by the elasticity of the oscillation between the two.
Let's tie this back to the mitochondria, though, because the cellular level is where this gets really interesting.
Okay, let's do it.
In TCM, Yang Qi represents the body's active warming force. It is the metabolic fire. And the sources show this correlates directly to mitochondrial thermogenesis.
Mitochondrial thermogenesis. So inside the inner membrane of your mitochondria, there are specific proteins called uncoupling proteins, specifically UCP1.
Right. Under normal conditions, the proton gradient is used to spin a turbine that makes ATP. But under certain conditions, like cold exposure, these uncoupling proteins allow protons to leak back across the membrane without making ATP.
Oh, wow. So the energy from that gradient is instead released purely as heat.
Exactly. Yang Qi is quite literally the heat generated by your mitochondria adapting to their environment through proton uncoupling.
That makes so much sense because when you have a deficiency in Yang Qi in Chinese medicine, the symptoms are feeling cold all the time, sluggishness, slow physical recovery,
and a general lack of vitality. And what are the symptoms of mitochondrial dysfunction in Western medicine?
Cold intolerance, chronic fatigue, and delayed cellular repair.
Exactly. Two completely different languages describing the exact same physiological failure.
Wow. The crucial insight from TCM theory, however, is the concept of interdependence. Yin and yang are not just opposites, they literally create each other.
Right. The physical structure, the cell membrane, the organelles, the blood, the bodily fluids, that is yin material.
And the functional activity, the electrical firing, the thermogenesis, the ATP production, that is yang energy.
Exactly. The physical material of the cell, the yin, provides the structural foundation and the raw fuel required for energy production.
And conversely, the energy produced, the yang, is required to synthesize the proteins and lipids to build and repair the physical structure of the cell.
If yin fails, yang has no fuel. If yang fails, yin degrades. The texts state, and I love this quote, yin remains inside to act as a guard for yang, and yang stays outside to act as a servant for yin.
A total separation of yin and yang results in the collapse of the thermodynamic system. Biologically, that is the definition of death.
Right. And there's a great principle in the texts. A matter reaching its extreme will turn into its opposite.
Oh, like running a severe fever. Your body's producing a massive amount of heat, pure yang, to fight an infection.
Exactly. But it pushes the system to such an extreme that the regulatory mechanism flips, and you suddenly experience uncontrollable shivering and extreme cold.
The sensation of extreme yin.
It's a protective biological paradox, really. A forced reset of the autonomic nervous system to prevent thermal death.
I like to think of yin and yang like the battery of a smartphone. You know, you can't just have output.
Right. You can't just drain it constantly.
Yeah. Yeah. The screen glowing, the apps processing data, the speaker playing music, that's all yang. Eventually, the phone dies. You fundamentally require the recharge cycle, plugging it into the wall and just leaving it alone to hold the charge.
And that period of passive reception, the yin, is the only thing that makes the yang possible. When this interplay is functioning properly, with a high degree of elasticity, it generates what TCM calls normal qi.
Normal qi, and that isn't just like having energy, right?
No, it is the optimal, resilient supply of energy that sustains cellular development, mounts immediate immune responses to pathogens, and maintains the integrity of the physical structure.
Okay, so we have the fuel, the ATP, glitching through quantum barriers. We have the regulation, the yin and yang of our nervous system and cellular molecules. But how does this energy actually travel around the body?
The highway system.
Yeah. If my liver needs energy, the ATP doesn't just float randomly through the bloodstream hoping it bumps into the right cell, right?
Right. Exactly. And this is where Western medicine struggled for a very long time to reconcile with Eastern medicine. In TCM, Qi flows through energetic pathways called meridians.
Right, meridians.
But for decades, anatomists would dissect a cadaver, look for these meridians alongside arteries and nerves, find nothing, and just dismiss the entire concept.
But modern biophysics completely reframes this. I was diving into the literature on the tissue tensegrity matrix, and it honestly blew my mind.
It's incredible stuff. Tensegrity tensional integrity is an architectural concept where structures stabilize themselves by balancing continuous tension with discontinuous compression.
And in the human body, this tensegrity matrix is the fascial network.
Exactly. Fascia is the connective tissue that wraps every single muscle, organ, blood vessel, and nerve fiber. It is a continuous body-wide web from the top of your head to the bottom of your feet.
See, I used to think of fascia as just inert wrapping paper, like
No.
the biological equivalent of bubble wrap keeping the organs from bumping into each other.
A lot of people do.
Yeah.
But the biophysics papers show it is a highly active, highly conductive material. This continuous fascial network is composed heavily of collagen fibers.
Right.
And bound tightly to these collagen fibers is liquid crystalline water.
Okay, wait, I need to unpack liquid crystalline water because that sounds straight out of science fiction.
It really does. But water in our bodies isn't just sloshing around like water in a glass. When water molecules interface with the specific hydrophilic surfaces of collagen in the fascia, they align into a highly structured, organized grid.
They form a fourth phase of water, a liquid crystal.
Yes. And because of this highly structured geometric nature, this fascial network acts as a low-impedance biological waveguide.
So it is essentially a fiber optic network and a semiconductor built into our anatomy.
Exactly.
Here's where it gets really interesting for me. Instead of a garden hose pumping water, I picture it like a massive three-dimensional physical spider web.
Oh, that's a great visualization.
Yeah, like if a fly hits a spider web on the far left side, the tension of the web instantly transmits a vibrational frequency to the spider resting on the far right side.
Right. The spider doesn't need a telephone wire to know the fly is there.
Exactly. The structural tension itself is the communication network.
And the fascia acts exactly like that web. It transmits extra neuronal electric currents. Because of a phenomenon called the Grothus mechanism, protons can jump incredibly fast along these liquid crystalline water wires.
Far faster than nerve impulses travel.
Exactly. Furthermore, the fascia acts as a fiber optic cable for biophotons.
Biophotons, those are ultra-weak emissions of light generated by cellular metabolism, right? Like our cells literally glow in the dark.
Yes, they do. The mitochondria emit light as a byproduct of the electron transport chain. The fascial network guides these light emissions and electrical currents throughout the body.
Wow.
And researchers have actually mapped to the pathways of lowest electrical resistance in this fascial web, and they map almost perfectly onto the classical acupuncture meridians described over 2,000 years ago.
That is insane. So when an acupuncturist puts a thin metal needle into your leg to treat a digestive issue in your stomach, they aren't practicing magic.
Not at all. They are tapping into a physical, highly conductive fascial pathway.
Because the needle creates a mechanical stretch in the collagen, which actually generates a tiny electrical charge called piezoelectricity, and transmits that bioelectrical and biophotonic information up the spider web to the specific organ.
Exactly. The movement of qi through these channels is directly mirrored by cellular ion flow and proton gradients along these fascial planes.
And the main reservoir, the central hub where all this structural tension and electrical potential pools, is what TCM calls the dantian, located in the lower abdomen.
Right. But this network doesn't just flow randomly. The distribution and interaction of this energy among the internal organs is governed by another core TCM framework, the five-element theory.
Wood, fire, earth, metal, and water.
Yes. The five elements are a systems biology approach to categorize organ functions and their interactions to maintain energy homeostasis. They operate in two primary cycles, generation and suppression.
Okay, generation. That's a mother-child relationship where one element feeds the next, right?
Exactly. Wood fuels fire, fire creates earth-like ash, earth bears metal, metal collects water, and water nourishes wood.
And the suppression cycle is equally important. It's the biological braking system to prevent overactivity.
Right. Water puts out fire, fire melts metal, metal chops wood, wood parts earth with its roots, earth dams water, Let's look at how this maps to actual biology.
Okay.
The earth element correlates to the spleen and stomach in TCM, which are responsible for the digestion and transportation of nutrients.
And the water element correlates to the kidney, which regulates fluid circulation, filters the blood, and stores foundational metabolic energy.
So in the five-element cycle, earth suppresses or controls water. Physiologically, your digestive system's ability to process and distribute nutrients and fluids directly impacts the kidney's workload.
So if your digestion, your earth element, is weak, it fails to manage fluids properly.
Exactly. The fluids pool, leading to systemic water retention or edema. Biologically, the digestive system has failed to regulate the fluid load, meaning Earth has failed to control water.
That's a fascinating way to look at it. Another beautiful example is wood and fire. Wood corresponds to the liver, which governs the smooth flow of blood and energy.
And fire corresponds to the heart and the brain. In a healthy generation cycle, wood nourishes fire.
Because the liver synthesizes critical lipids, cholesterol, and plasma proteins that the brain desperately needs to maintain synaptic connections and neurochemistry.
Right. A healthy liver ensures a healthy brain. They're locked in this web of mutual support and regulation.
So when the fascial pathways are open and the ion gradients are flowing smoothly, the five elements remain balanced. The body experiences robust health.
But this systemic interconnectivity means that a disruption in one area causes a cascade of failures throughout the entire network.
Which makes sense. So if the body is essentially this highly pressurized, highly conductive fascial highway, what happens when there's a roadblock?
Well, we know these pathways require smooth communication. But when you look at the clinical data on something as common as daily psychological stress, you start to see physical, biological traffic jams that perfectly mirror ancient pathology.
Because the five-element suppression cycles provide this flawless, predictive blueprint for understanding stress-induced metabolic dysfunction.
Exactly. We all know intuitively that stress ruins our health, but the sources explain the precise mechanisms of how it breaks the machine.
Yeah, I was reading the section Mapping Emotional States to the Organs. Let's look at anxiety and worry.
Okay. In TCM, excessive rumination, anxiety, and worry are emotions closely tied to the earth element, specifically the spleen. The texts say overthinking damages the spleen.
And the spleen, in this framework, is the primary organ of digestion and energy extraction from food.
Right. So to translate that into modern neuroendocrinology, when you experience chronic anxiety worrying about your mortgage and upcoming presentation family issues, it activates your hypothalamic pituitary adrenal axis.
The HPA axis.
Yes. The HPA axis is your primary stress response cascade. The hypothalamus in the brain secretes corticotropin-releasing hormone, telling the pituitary gland to signal the adrenal gland sitting on top of your kidneys to release massive amounts of cortisol.
Because cortisol is designed for short-term life or death survival. If a tiger is chasing you, you don't need it to digest your lunch. You need glucose in your muscles immediately.
Exactly. So cortisol systematically suppresses non-essential functions like the gastrointestinal tract and the immune system.
But chronic low-level anxiety keeps this HPA axis constantly engaged.
And it literally shuts down your gut's ability to secrete digestive enzymes, absorb nutrients, and extract ATP-generating fuel from your food.
Wow. So anxiety triggers the HPA axis, which suppresses digestion. Excessive emotion damages the earth element, causing spleen deficiency.
It's the exact same mechanism, just observed from two different epochs of human history.
That is just incredible.
And the cascade continues. Let's return to wood and fire. The liver and the brain. We established that wood nourishes fire, but anger, resentment, and chronic frustration negatively influence the wood element.
Which causes a condition known as liver qi stagnation.
Right. When liver qi stagnates, it fails to nourish the fire element. Biologically, chronic stress and high cortisol disrupt hepatic function.
So the liver stops efficiently delivering fuel molecules and essential proteins to the brain.
And this energy deficit in the brain alters neurotransmitter signaling. Specifically, it downregulates the production of serotonin, the mood-stabilizing neurotransmitter, and upregulates glutamate, an excitatory neurotransmitter that, in excess, causes neural toxicity.
The ultimate result of this altered signaling is clinical depression.
Exactly.
So a purely psychological state anger causes a hepatic failure to fuel the brain, resulting in a new psychological state, depression.
The wood fails to feed the fire and the fire dies down.
This is astonishing. But it begs a massive question.
What's that?
If my emotions can literally shut down my mitochondrial energy production and alter my brain chemistry, am I just at the mercy of my environment? Like, every time I get stuck in traffic or have an argument, am I inevitably damaging my earth element and crashing my quantum coherence?
If we connect this to the bigger picture, recognizing these patterns is the first step to liberation, not a life sentence.
Okay, good.
The body is constantly communicating its internal state. The challenge is learning how to listen to the telemetry data before the system crashes. For thousands of years, Chinese medicine practitioners have used pulse taking to assess the state of the organs and the dynamic balance of yin and yang.
Right, they place their fingers on the radial artery at the wrist and feel for different qualities, whether the pulse is wiry, like a guitar string, slippery, like pearls rolling in a dish, or deep and faint.
It sounds totally subjective to a modern patient.
Oh, absolutely.
It relies on incredible tactile sensitivity. But modern science has developed a highly precise digital equivalent, heart rate variability, or HRV.
Okay, HRV. And HRV does not measure how fast your heart beats. That's your basic heart rate.
Right. HRV measures the microscopic variations in time between consecutive heartbeats.
So if your heart beats at 60 beats per minute, it isn't beating exactly once every 1.0 seconds. Sometimes it's 0.9 seconds, sometimes 1.1 seconds.
Exactly. And that variability is a direct window into the autonomic nervous system. HRV tracks the dynamic, real-time tug-of-war between the parasympathetic system, the yin, restorative side, and the sympathetic system, the yang, stress response side.
Got it. So high HRV means there's a lot of variation between beats.
Yes, it indicates your body is agile, seamlessly shifting between yin and yang, applying the gas and the brake perfectly as needed.
While low HRV means the intervals between your heartbeats are rigid and uniform.
Right. You are stuck, usually locked into a sympathetic yang-dominant stress state. Your foot is glued to the gas pedal, and the system is burning out.
So ancient pulse taking and modern HRV tracking are essentially doing the exact same diagnostic work, analyzing the rhythmic telemetry of the heart to determine if yin and yang are balanced.
Exactly. And the sources highlight a mind-bending external factor that influences this rhythm. Research shows that our HRV literally synchronizes with fluctuations in the Earth's geomagnetic field, the GMFT.
Wait, really? The magnetic field of the Earth is altering the microscopic timing of my heartbeat?
It sounds crazy, but yes. A continuous 31-day monitoring study demonstrated that human HRV rhythms synchronize directly with the interplanetary magnetic field and solar wind dynamics.
Wow.
When there are geomagnetic disturbances like solar storms, it disrupts our autonomic balance. The data shows it often leads to excessive sympathetic activation, a dangerous predominance of yang.
This perfectly validates the classical TCM concept of heaven qi regulating human qi.
It really does. We are not isolated, hermetically sealed bags of chemicals. We are open thermodynamic systems resonating with the energetic and magnetic environment of the planet.
So by tracking biomarkers like HRV, alongside an understanding of classical qi flow, you can pinpoint exactly which systemic element is becoming depleted.
You can see the sympathetic dominance, the failing of the yin weeks or months before it manifests as a physical disease.
You can spot the roadblock before the cars crash.
Exactly.
But recognizing the depletion is only the diagnosis. How do we fix the battery? When the HRV is tanking, the digestion is stalled, and the mitochondria are suffering from decoherence, how do we rebuild that quantum efficiency?
To answer that, we have to look at how thousands of years of herbal medicine directly targets mitochondrial recovery.
When people think of Chinese herbal medicine, they often picture like vague folk remedies.
Sure, or just random roots in a jar.
Yeah. But classical texts like Shen Nong's classic on herbalism, compiled over 2 millennia ago, represent an incredibly sophisticated empirical system of pharmacology.
Oh, absolutely. They categorized hundreds of herbs based on specific energetic properties, thermal natures, and their targeted effects on the yin, yang, and the 5 elements.
And modern clinical practice is taking these exact classical formulas, running them through mass spectrometry and cellular assays, and realizing they are essentially a biological masterclass in mitochondrial health recovery.
It's phenomenal. Let's examine yang-invigorating herbs. Herbs like Cistantius herba, or Cinnamomori herba. In classical practice, these are prescribed to stimulate the metabolic fire, to warm the body, and rescue a patient from exhaustion and coldness.
And when modern researchers study these specific herbs at the cellular level, they find they directly stimulate mitochondrial activity.
Right. They literally ramp up the electron transport chain to produce more ATP. But in doing so, they cause a slight transient increase in reactive oxygen species, or ROS.
ROS, those are free radicals, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
And this introduces a critical nuance in cellular biology. For decades, the wellness industry told us that free radicals are universally bad.
Yeah, that they cause aging and that we must consume massive amounts of antioxidants to destroy them.
But massive amounts of isolated antioxidants can actually blunt your energy production. Uncontrolled, massive bursts of ROS cause oxidative stress and damage to the cell membrane and DNA. But a small, highly controlled burst of ROS acts as a crucial communication molecule.
Okay, so when these yang-invigorating herbs cause a slight spike in ROS, it triggers a retrograde signal from the mitochondria to the cell's nucleus.
Exactly. It tells the cellular machinery, we are ramping up energy production, the turbine is spinning faster, we need to reinforce the walls.
And the cell responds by upregulating its own internal antioxidant capacity. It synthesizes more protective enzymes.
This biological process is called mitohormesis. By applying a small beneficial stress, the mitochondria are forced to build back stronger, expanding their overall physical capacity to generate ATP safely.
It is the cellular equivalent of weightlifting. You go to the gym, lift heavy weights, and cause micro tears and localized inflammation in your muscles.
Right, it's biological damage.
But your body responds to that specific signal by overcompensating, repairing the muscle, and making it larger and stronger. Yang-invigorating herbs act as personal trainers for your mitochondria, stressing them just enough to force an upgrade in energy production capacity.
That's exactly it. But a personal trainer isn't enough to build muscle.
Right.
If you just lift weights every day and never rest or eat protein, you will destroy your muscles.
You need the recovery phase.
Right. And that is exactly where key invigorating herbs come, in herbs like Asian ginseng and astragalus. While yang herbs stimulate the engine to produce ROS and signal for growth, key invigorating herbs directly enhance the mitochondrial glutathione antioxidant capacity.
Glutathione is the body's master antioxidant.
Yes, these herbs provide the deep structural defense system, the biological scaffolding needed to sustain that high level of energy production over time without the cell burning itself out.
So the yang herbs are the personal trainer stressing the muscle. The key herbs are the protein shake, the deep sleep, and the tissue repair that solidify the gains.
The pairing of these herbs in classical formulas beautifully illustrates the core concept of yin-yang interdependence. You need the physical antioxidant defense woven seamlessly into the yang, the active energy production.
Because if you just push yang with stimulants like drinking 5 espresso shots, without supporting the yin structure, you get oxidative damage, severe anxiety, and premature cellular aging.
The metabolic fire burns the house down.
Right. But if you just take massive amounts of isolated antioxidants without stimulating the mitochondria, you quench the necessary ROS signaling, and the cell never upgrades its energy capacity.
The fire gets put out completely. Traditional pharmacology formulates these compounds to balance these pathways perfectly, ensuring that as you increase the ATP output, you simultaneously increase the cellular resilience to handle that output.
This science is incredible, but we don't all have a classical herbalist on speed dial, and sourcing high-quality Sustantius herba isn't practical for everyone. So how do I apply this right now in my own home using daily habits? Because if our biology is this responsive, my daily choices must be continuously programming my mitochondrial efficiency.
You don't need exotic herbs to influence these exact same quantum and biological systems. Translating traditional Zhang Fu organ maintenance and quantum biophysics into modern actionable wellness gives us a highly effective daily protocol.
I want to start with the most fundamental habit, which directly addresses the earth element, diet and digestion.
Good place to start. In TCM, the spleen transforms food into what they call grain qi, which then combines with oxygen from the lungs to create usable systemic energy.
But the critical detail is that the spleen needs warmth to function.
Exactly. A prevalent TCM diagnosis in modern society is spleen qi deficiency, often caused by consuming too much cold, raw food and iced drinks.
Yeah, I see people drinking massive tumblers of ice water all day, eating cold salads for lunch, and they are chronically bloated, lethargic, and have terrible HRV scores.
From a thermodynamic perspective, your digestive enzymes like amylase and pepsin require a specific core body temperature to operate optimally. When you constantly flood the gastrointestinal tract with cold liquid, you force the body to expend valuable yang energy mitochondrial heat just to warm the stomach up to operating temperature before digestion can even begin.
So if you're already energy deficient, you are taxing the system before you even extract a single calorie of energy from the food.
It's basically a massive energy drain.
Simply switching to warm, cooked foods, soups, stews, roasted vegetables, and drinking room temperature or warm water, drastically reduces the energetic overhead of digestion.
Right. You preserve your yang qi for actual cellular function instead of using it as an internal space heater. Next is aligning with biological rhythms. The 5 elements are deeply tied to daily and seasonal cycles.
Okay, circadian rhythms.
At the most basic physiological level, deep sleep restores the physical yin structure of the cell. Daytime activity, movement, and cognitive work burn the yang energy.
So if you disrupt your circadian rhythms, staying up until 2 a.m., scrolling on a bright phone screen, eating a heavy meal at midnight, you are fundamentally scrambling mitochondrial respiration.
The sources show that mitochondrial ROS production and cellular respiration follow strict circadian cycles governed by clock genes. Sleep isn't merely shutting down the brain, it is the physiological requirement for clearing out metabolic waste.
And rebuilding the yin structure of your cells so they possess the structural integrity to produce yang energy the next day.
Exactly. A disrupted circadian rhythm directly induces decoherence.
What about exercise? We talked about the yang herbs acting as a cellular personal trainer. How do we trigger that mitochromesis macroscopically?
Physical movement physically pumps qi and bodily fluids through the fascial tensegrity matrix, maintaining the structural elasticity of the waveguides. But specifically, the literature points to high-intensity interval training, or HIIT, as a profound mitochondrial intervention.
Okay, so short, intense bursts of maximum effort-like sprinting for 30 seconds, followed by a period of active recovery.
HIIT provides the intense yang stimulus. The sudden massive demand for ATP creates an energy crisis in the muscle cells, raising the ratio of AMP to ATP.
And this activates an energy-sensing enzyme called AMPK.
Right, which in turn activates a master regulator pathway called PGC1-alpha.
PGC1-alpha, I saw that in the papers. It stands for Peroxisome Proliferator Activated Receptor Gamma Coactivator 1-alpha. Say that 5 times fast. What does it actually do?
It triggers mitochondrial biogenesis. It literally signals the cell's nucleus to manufacture brand new mitochondria.
Wow! You aren't just forcing your existing power plants to work harder, you are physically building new power plants inside the cell. You are expanding the absolute capacity of your cellular energy grid.
But again, honoring the yin-yang balance, you must follow that intense yang stimulus with deep yin recovery sleep and high-quality protein to provide the building blocks for those new mitochondria.
Finally, we must look at light therapy. We discussed earlier how the fascial network acts as a waveguide for biophotons.
Yes, the human body is highly photoreceptive, far beyond just the eyes.
Using specific wavelength of light, particularly red and near-infrared LED light therapy, is becoming a massive tool for metabolic health.
These specific long wavelengths of light have the unique ability to penetrate the skin and tissue. Once inside the cell, the photons are absorbed directly by cytochrome C oxidase,
which is complex 4 in the mitochondrial electron transport chain, the exact same chain where the protons are quantum tunneling.
Yes. The light literally provides an external source of energy to the mitochondria. It helps disassociate nitric oxide, which can inhibit energy production under stress from the enzyme, allowing oxygen to bind properly.
That reduces oxidative stress and significantly increases ATP production.
In TCM terminology, this mimics the integration of clear qi from the environment. You are physically feeding the fascial waveguide with coherent light energy.
So what does this all mean? Synthesizing all of this. Balancing your energy isn't some mystical, unattainable enlightenment. It is highly practical physics and biology. It means eating warm, easily digestible foods to build grain qi without taxing your internal thermodynamics. It means doing intense exercise like HIIT to trigger PGC1-alpha and force the creation of new mitochondria.
It means protecting your sleep to rebuild your yin structure.
And it means managing your psychological stress so your HPA axis doesn't chronically suppress your earth spleen digestion and crash your neurochemistry.
This raises an important question, though. The ultimate goal here isn't to achieve a perfectly static, tranquil balance every single second of the day.
Right. A flat line in HRV is death.
Exactly. Health is about building massive resilience. Cultivating qi means giving your mitochondria the dynamic range to handle severe stress, a poor night's sleep, an emotional shock, a hard workout, a viral infection.
And bounce back efficiently without getting stuck in a sympathetic stress loop. You want a wide, highly elastic capacity for both yin and yang.
You want your internal battery to charge exceptionally fast and hold its power under heavy systemic load. That is the definition of true vitality.
We have covered an incredible amount of ground today, bridging thousands of years of human observation.
We really have.
We started at the smallest possible scale, learning that energy in the body relies on protons quantum tunneling through energy barriers in our mitochondria.
That process is sustained by the fragile quantum coherence provided by ATP hydrolysis.
We learned that this microscopic efficiency is regulated by the macro-level dance of yin and yang, which is perfectly mirrored by our parasympathetic and sympathetic nervous systems and cellular molecules like cGMP and PMP.
We examine how the bioelectrical energy flows through the continuous fascial tensegrity network, a liquid crystalline waveguide that maps precisely onto ancient meridian lines.
We explored how the five-element theory beautifully models the generation and suppression cycles of our organs, showing exactly how psychological stress physically shuts down digestion and alters brain chemistry.
And finally, we looked at how to take control of this system, from the targeted mitohormetic effects of ancient herbal medicine to modern habits like reducing the thermal load of digestion, practicing HIIT for mitochondrial biogenesis, and using red light therapy to feed the electron transport chain.
It is the ultimate instruction manual for your biological energy grid. But before we sign off, I want to leave you with one final, deeply provocative thought to mull over based on the biophysics research in our stack.
Okay, what stands out to you?
We established that our mitochondria use quantum tunneling to bypass physical barriers. We established that our fascial networks act as physical antennas, literally synchronizing our heartbeats with the fluctuations in the Earth's geomagnetic fields.
Right.
We are porous to the energy of the universe. In TCM, there is a concept that Yi guides Qi. Yi is the conscious, intentional mind.
Oh, wow.
So if we are fundamentally quantum resonating beings, could our conscious intentions, our focused thoughts, actually be rewriting our cellular biology at the quantum level in real time?
That's a profound thought. If the biological structures are waveguides, consciousness might very well be the architect determining the signal that travels through them.
If your mind can literally alter the quantum coherence of your cells, what are you going to program them to do today? You have the instruction manual. You know the mechanics behind the murkiness. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive into the quantum engine of the human body. Keep exploring and take control of your energy.
We'll see you on the next deep dive.